When people say, oh, people sold out and, you know, their career went downhill, that's often a little bit of a sweeping statement because, you know, singers don't suddenly become worse because they've got money in the bank.
I'm not saying whether this was a good thing for sort of the cultural advancement of British youth or not, but I think that if you look at it realistically, it's probably a bit of Malcolm McLaren's spin.
So Rod probably unwittingly became the target of venom from punk rockers.
Bear in mind, it wasn't his fault that this should happen. I mean, he wasn't instrumental in the banning of the Sex Pistols record. So any flack that he got at the time was totally unwarranted and thoroughly undeserved.
Rod was always sort of outside looking in a bit. And as soon as he felt that they weren't moving on musically anymore, he wasn't, the challenge wasn't enough, and that they weren't going to crack America, because that's the real key for him. He wants to crack America. Then he starts to look to albums like Atlantic Crossing to do that job.
He'd made that with Tom Dowd, with the Memphis Horns, with Willie Mitchell, with two of Booker T's MGs. He really wanted to make an album that sat in the canon of soul music that he'd grown up listening to. Unfortunately, whether it was what the producers felt they were doing, what he felt he needed to be doing, what his record company felt he needed to be doing to reach this American market, it came out a bit like American FM rock, really. It wasn't, the soul he was looking for had got diluted, which was a shame.
Perhaps that's the album which will stand as his testament in a way, you know, because it was kind of the midpoint between his earlier work that he'd done for years and years, in fairness, with the Faces and solo initially, the kind of authentic, gritty rock and gritty soul and R&B ballads. And then, of course, in his later career, he's been, you know, very kind of mainstream, very, very glossy and commercial and a little bit coffee table. Atlantic Crossing was perhaps the, you know, the peak after which he went down, where he still had elements of his kind of, for want of a better word, street cred roots, but he was also going global. He was going a little bit private jet and a little bit glossy.
In America, it helped to make the transition for him after leaving the Faces to, you know, a major rock star, which is what he wanted to be.
In these days, changing ways, so-called liberated days, a story comes to mind of a friend of mine. Georgia boy was gay, I guess, nothing more and nothing less, the kindest guy I ever knew. His mother's tears fell in vain. The afternoon George tried to explain that he needed love like all the rest. Pa said there must be a mistake. How can my son not be straight after all I've said and done for him? And we sang.
There's one song that called "The Killing of Georgie," which Rod wrote, which caused quite a stir at the time because it was about a friend of his, a black homosexual who was killed, and it caused a lot of fuss. That Rod should actually record something about that, and of course it raised all sorts of implications and questions about was Rod himself gay, which of course he wasn't. But as a real sort of heart-rending song, it still stands out.
The Killing of Georgie stands out in the Rod Stewart canon quite simply because it's not laddie, it's not beery, it's not... But that's if you listen to it from a lyrical point of view and you understand what it's about. It's the lyrics mean so much to people because they meant a lot to Rod when he was writing them. He was genuinely upset about his friend being killed, you know, and this was his sort of outpouring about it.
Out of a dark inside street came a New Jersey gang with just one aim, roll some innocent passerby. There ensued a fearful fight, screams rung out in the night, George's head in a sidewalk cornerstone. A leather kid, a switchblade knife, who did not intend to take his life, pushed his luck a little too far that night. Sawed-off blood dispersed the gang, a crowd gathered, a police came, an ambulance screamed to halt, 53rd and 3rd, but we sang.
the story is very well told in kind of chapters. You know, it builds very well like a good piece of writing does. It's not just kind of, hey everyone, some of my best friends are gay. It's not just that. It is actually very well detailed. You know, even down to the sort of the streets in New York and what's going on there. And then when it closes with that couplet about youth's a mask and it doesn't last, live it long and live it fast, that's one of the great kind of payoff lines in pop lyrics, really. It's kind of pop philosophy at its very best. And this is a tremendous version we get here in the concert, because he just generally gets into it. He seems to cut himself off from all the palaver for a while, and he just sits down and sings it really, really well.
He said never wait or hesitate, get in, kid, before it's too late, 'cause you may never get another chance, 'cause youth's a mask, but it don't last, live it long and live it fast. Georgie was a friend of mine, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Killing of Georgie is a wonderful song. The problem with it is that listening to it 20 years later, it doesn't have quite the same effect. It's dated. But in the context of this DVD on stage, as a cameo of a period in time in which this song meant something because it was making a statement about the gay problems, if you like, at that period, and because it was sung with such genuine sincerity, it comes across, it works. You can see it again as a little time capsule, you know, of that period historically. You know, it's saying something worthwhile. 20 years later, I'm not so sure.